welcome all of you for joining us for this is actually a special AMA because we have not often brought in people who have actually built a Gen AI first company, and in this case, actually even had a successful exit with it. So I'm Will Poole, co-founder and managing partner of Capria, and I'm super pleased to have Gaurav Oberoi with me today. He's I think you're now the VP of AI and products for DocuSign, something like that.
I'm VP of product at DocuSign. My mandate we are still, sort of working through, but AI certainly is a part of it.
Fantastic. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to start just ask a couple of questions to get everybody warmed up. Let Gaurav tell you a bit about his story and how he got things going. I saw him talk at a fund that was an incubator AI fund that had invested in his company before, and I was really impressed with how he told the story. So I'm going to ask him to repeat a bit of that, and but then we're going to get into some technical details and some hard questions about how to think about building products in this new age of incredibly fast-moving foundation models that every week brings a new twist and a turn that could either make your product plan or invalidate your product plan. So with that, and no further ado, Gaurav, thank you for joining us, and let's hear how you got going.
Thank you, Will. It's a pleasure to be here, and I was excited to participate when Will told me about Capria's investment thesis and the founders, and I looked at some of the companies, and you all are very impressive. So I'm excited to speak with you all. My story is, I've done multiple early stage startups. Lexion is my third. There's actually another one in between that's still running as a sort of cash flow company. So I've done this a few times. My background is in computer science. I knew I wanted to build things with software from a pretty early age. Maybe like some of you in the room, I got into computers from playing video games. So don't let your, I encourage my kids to have the right amount of screen time. But I got into video games, and my dad introduced me to programming. He worked in IT. And I started building games with my friends and my school teachers and school and them. And when I'd show them to friends, they'd be like, wow, this is great. Can you do X and Y? And that was iterating to product market fit. And I just loved it when people are like, this game is really cool. Can I get a floppy disk? That's how old I am of the game. And so I kind of knew I wanted to do this. I went to college to study computer science. I moved to Seattle to work for Amazon early in my career. And I was there for only a year and a half. It was really great training as a young engineer, fantastic engineering org. But I had the itch to do something, and I'd saved up some money, and I had very low expenses. And so I quit to do my first company. And just to show you how risk averse I was, me and my friend, I told my friend, I was like, Chuck, chances are we're going to build a good product. I have confidence we can do that. The chances that we create a solid business are low. Startups have high failure rates. So in the worst case scenario, maybe in a year or two, we'll be back at Amazon and have slightly better jobs. Like honestly, that is the kind of low risk approach we took, and we're just really interested in going and building something. That product was helped roommates split bills. Splitwise is a modern competitor to that. And after doing that consumer product, I went on. We sold that company. It was a acqui-hire style deal, but it was very lucrative for the founders. I worked for the acquirer, worked for somebody else, and started another company, Precision Polling. This one used Twilio to basically it was SurveyMonkey for the phone. You could design phone surveys, you could run them. A lot of our customers were in politics. We also had, and the DNC and Obama's campaign used us eventually. We also had customers in the medical industry. Hospitals have to run a lot of multimodal surveys to get funding. So it's kind of interesting. SurveyMonkey acquired us. I worked there for a while, and I got to see hyper growth there as the company went from 50 to 800 people and eventually IPO. And then my latest venture, Lexion, really came about from me looking at some of the academic research that was coming out circa 2013, 14, 15, especially around computer vision. And deep learning was really beginning to work. It wasn't just hype. There were step function improvements in a bunch of object detection and image recognition benchmarks. And I was like, wow, this is real. How do I apply this to a B2B SaaS product? And so I started tinkering. And around then, the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, a research institute here, kind of like OpenAI, but actually open, jokingly, funded by Paul Allen, tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, we're a research institute. We have PhD researchers and engineers doing public research, but we've spun out a couple of companies by accident and we want to formalize that. So we're creating an incubator. Do you want to join? And it was kind of Y Combinator style financial terms. And it sounded better than me doing it in my pajamas at home. So I joined them, spent about a year there, tinkered on 5, 6 different ideas before we landed on Lexion and we launched the company. That was a little over 5 years ago. And we recently exited the business to DocuSign. The company took advantage of advances in natural language processing. And really, the core thesis was, hey, NLP is getting good and it's getting better fast. A lot of the world dips into these long documents to extract structured information and type it into some ERP system. These documents could be sales orders that have to then be typed up into Salesforce, vendor contracts that have to be tracked for financial terms, HR agreements, etc. A lot of different kinds of contracts. And we thought, and we saw some examples close up of friends and family who worked in procurement at really large companies paying gobs of money to other businesses to come and say, hey, we have 50,000 vendor contracts. Can you extract these 12 things and put them into a database? We'll pay you, $1 million. And we're like, wow, there's a lot of money here. With where NLP is going, surely we can make this better. So that was the core thesis of the company. It evolved into a end-to-end contract management system, and we compete with the likes of Ironclad and Agiloft, and in India, the company is Spot Draft. There's a bunch of players all over the world. It's a competitive space, and we were quick to embrace Gen AI as it started to come out. So I'd love to talk about that as well. And eventually exited to DocuSign. So I know I've been rambling for a while, and I can't see.
No, that's a great introduction. Thank you. And just to be clear, so you were focused on the advances in NLP and how that could create value from all that unstructured data. But this is well before Gen AI, right? You said 2016?
This is well before. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were looking. We wrote the first code in late 2018, and sometime in 2017 is when the Transformers paper came out.
Yeah.
But the BERT was the big thing back then, which were these embeddings, and we were using that. But yes, it's before Gen AI happened.
Yeah. And so maybe tell us a bit about what happened. So you probably saw GPT-3 come out, well, right, because you were deep in the thick of things, but saw it probably wasn't that great, right? But it had a trajectory that was interesting. So what would rewind in history and tell us what did you feel when you saw that? And then of course, when November of 2022 came around, what did that do to you and your product plan?
Yeah. So a couple of things. We had a really strong AI team, and people on our team. My co-founder was at Microsoft Research building NLP products for years. We had people from Meta, from Google, from their AI groups who were on our team, and we published papers. As a company, we did that as well. So we were close to the literature and watching it closely. We even were playing with GPT-2. And so we'd been playing around with this and keeping our eyeballs on it. I looked at it in two ways. One, I looked at it as a threat because we'd made a lot of investments in our own deep learning stack, building models from the ground up, training them. If a new technology comes out that obviates that, we have to be aware and know that what that's gonna do. And then I looked at it as an opportunity. Hey, this tool is powerful in ways that what the previous stack of technology was not. And what does that enable us to do? So we looked at it from both perspectives. It quickly started to become apparent to me that a lot of the investments we'd made would need to eventually transition over to using this new tech. So we'd need to make some difficult decisions and let go of some of our earlier investments.
Well, that was a euphemism for the platform would basically obsolete your innovation. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah, because you're now the third founder I've talked to recently about this, and having entire chunks of innovation and even areas that they might have seen as their core differentiation simply evaporate overnight,
That's right.
as the rising tide of
That's right. I
platform.
mean, prior to the latest incarnations of large language models, if you wanted to extract structured information from a 5-page contract, like who are the parties, what's the effective date, does it auto renew, what are the payment terms, if we get sued, which country are we going to fight about it in, would take a small team of NLP researchers, piles of annotated data. So annotators, infrastructure to run experiments, tweak them, be able to look at your metrics, iteration by iteration, and tweak your way into something that works reasonably well. Now it's an API call with a prompt and an afternoon of goofing around with the prompt to get something that is, 80, 90% as close. And with fine tuning, you can get even closer. So yes, 100%.
So let me come back to that, because the difference between the 80 or 90% and the production ready, your enterprise customers will actually pay you happily for it every month. There's probably a big gap there. I want to come to that in a minute, but let me back up a little bit to the data side of things, because you couldn't do your training certainly with your earlier NLP engines without a lot of that unstructured data as examples. And hey, if I'm a big enterprise and you're just some smart up kid, hey, okay, you've had a couple startups before, you've been successful, but why am I going to give you my 20,000 contracts? So how did you deal with the chicken and egg problem there?
It was difficult. And you hit the nail on the head. People don't want to trust a startup with proprietary valuable information. So what we first did was we scraped public data and made sure that wherever we scraped it from, the licensing was clear, which, by the way, all you founders, I will tell you, someday when you raise your next round or have an exit, all of that stuff will come under scrutiny. And I just went through it. So I'm so glad that we were so above board with it, because, DocuSign's IP team was like, how did you train these models? Where does this data set come from?
You
That
don't
wasn't a
follow
problem.
the model that I heard Eric Schmidt say in his interview at Stanford, which you should watch if you haven't seen this, where he says, yeah, just do whatever you need to do and let the lawyers clean it up afterwards. But you didn't do that, I hear. That's good.
We did something a little better. We knew that this would become a thing, and so I'm glad we did that. There is some truth to what Eric said too, because if you don't get it done, nothing else matters. So there's a little bit of premature, also from Stanford, premature optimization is the rule of law.
So you used some clever hacking. You found public data that got you some example documents. You made sure your IP provenance was clean, and that was enough to get you started, really.
We also did some other things. So I leaned heavily into getting a POC with a larger organization in the early days. And we had a few that were like post NDA, like drafting up the thing. One landed, and that was with a big West Coast law firm here in the United States called Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich and Rosati. They are lawyers to many of the biggest tech companies in the world, Google, et cetera, and a whole bunch of companies. So they're very well known. And they had a person there, their chief innovation officer, David Wong, was evaluating some of this AI technology, because there was a bunch of this beginning to happen in legal back then. And so I was lucky to get connected with him. And he said, well, look, I've prepared a test with these public records documents. Can you guys go create models? And then I'll test them with another batch that I've hidden away. And so we did, and we came back to him in about a week, and he was blown away with the results. And that turned into one of our first major customers in a six-figure annual deal. And they came in and became an investor. And so he sat on our board. That allowed us to also get access to a bunch of documents and additional training data. So that was a big value prop for us, and a way for that investor to help their portfolio company be more successful. And also the credibility of a law firm then allowed us to go get our first enterprise customers. So that's the game we played.
And how did you convince them that your use of those documents with, I assume you're using the OpenAI API back then, and there's a lot of concern swirling around, are those guys going to train on my information? Is it going to become part of this big blob of
Yeah.
knowledge up in a black box in the cloud?
So
How did you convince them that was okay?
this wasn't an issue because this was early 2019. And so
Ah,
OpenAI, was in its
okay.
infancy, and these products weren't out there. However, what you're describing became an issue later as we started to release products that do use Gen AI. And so as we started to do that, we quickly started to find that in our sales cycles, we started to get extra scrutiny at the privacy and security level. And I sat in on a couple of those calls. Salespeople were reaching out and being like, hey, Gaurav, can you jump on this deal? Customers really concerned about privacy and data. And so after having a couple of these conversations, we did kind of the standard thing. I identified like, I can't be in every call. How do I scale this? We need to train our salespeople to talk about it. We need to get ahead of it with the right collateral. So we need a simple one pager that explains this. And then we also need some legal backing. So we may need to update our terms to make this more clear and make people feel better. So that's kind of what we did. We were able to show, hey, look, we have this agreement with OpenAI. They're not allowed to use your data. None of it's going to go over. We're indemnifying you in case that happens. So there was some legal protection there, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really getting ahead of the problem, educating the customer, and then, of course, leaning in with, oh, and we're SOC 2 compliant and ISO blah, blah, blah. So kind of throwing the security apparatus at bolstering, hey, look, we are credible people. We are taking care of your data.
Yeah, because I imagine that everybody that's in the enterprise sales side of the world is facing exactly that question right now, right?
Big time. And I'm seeing it here at DocuSign, even at bigger scale. So it's a real thing. And I think the industry will, it's early days, but I get the feeling that what will eventually happen is, compute will just keep moving closer to data. And so as we see the rise of open models, or even look, all these companies are already hosting their data in, Azure or AWS or GCP. And those companies will either provide proprietary models that they make money off of, or will sell you servers and run open source models. Either way, it feels like that is going to be a model, at least for large enterprises, maybe not for SMBs mid-market.
So they can't afford it. All right, so I got a couple more questions for you, plenty more actually, but I want to give everybody a chance to ask some questions as well. You can either unmute yourself and jump in. We're not too big of a group here, or you can type it into the chat window, whichever anybody would prefer. So while
I don't bite. I've been a founder. I've made lots of mistakes. I'm fearless about asking silly questions because I'm like there's only upside. I'll learn something. So I encourage you to do that. This is a safe space.
Thank you for that suggestion, and let's hope we'll get some good questions coming. I want to come to the topic that we brushed on briefly there, which was the some good prompting, a couple of afternoons with the APIs. You get 80 or 90% of the way there. But then for a long time, everybody knows that the last 20% takes 80% of the time. Is that more so or less so in a Gen AI world? And let's talk about the current Gen AI world, and later we can talk about what happens as the next platforms come along. But what was your experience moving from that 80 or 90% to the 100% enterprise ready was something that you could really feel good about sending your bill out every month?
This is spot on. It is a good instinct to know what you're getting into, that it's very easy to create a compelling prototype, but productionizing it has the following challenges. One, you want some confidence that if you roll this out to your broad base of customers, it's going to work for them. It's hard to know that because you don't know what the shape of their data is or what they're going to throw at it. Maybe you showed it some happy path things, or maybe you found some really difficult things and you got lucky and it worked on those. But what about all the stuff in the middle? You just don't know. So the way you know is you try to build good evaluation sets. And that is where a lot of the game has shifted now. So it is still a machine learning problem. You're still dealing with a non-deterministic thing. And you want to be able to make some guarantees to yourself and your customers on how well it works. So an eval set is simply saying, hey, I'm using Gen AI to, I don't know, classify Amazon reviews as good, bad, horrible, whatever. And so I'm going to first manually, get 100 or 200 of them, manually classify them. And that's what I'm going to use as my set. And now I'm going to evaluate how are you doing against this? And I'm going to change prompts. And that way I know if my prompts are getting better or worse, or if I'm breaking stuff. So you need a framework and a harness to do that. That is super critical. Another thing you need is the ability to address the following thing that will happen in production. Customer comes back and says, hey, I like your product and your AI is pretty good, but it got this wrong. Can you fix it? What are you going to do now? So you need to have an answer, because If your answer is, sorry, bub, I can't fix it, just, I don't know, do it yourself, your customers will lose confidence and they'll be like, and also if you have a competitor that has an answer to that, goodbye, because in your sales process and on their marketing website, that's what they're going to talk about. So you need to address I found a problem and I need to fix it. And then the third thing you need to do is you're going to find that the accuracy isn't all the way there. And a lot of times this manifests itself. Um, Customers always understand when there's something that's kind of hard to do and the AI might have gotten it wrong, but they don't understand when it seems trivially easy to them and the AI got it wrong. And that is like a really bad failure mode because they're just like, this thing doesn't work. And so you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And you may need to extract another 10, 15% of accuracy. Prompting is a way to go. And there's lots of different like fancy names to doing things in your prompts, like showing it examples, few shot learning, showing it counter examples, chain of thought reasoning. These are all fancy ways to say, make the instructions better for your intern, if you will. The other thing is fine tuning, which is, you've all heard about, some of you are doing. And really, fine tuning the data regimen is very different than it used to be for deep learning. With deep learning, it was give me lots of examples, thousands. And it's okay if like, I don't know, 15, 20% of them are kind of wrong. It's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll get the shape of the data and the model will learn. With fine tuning, it's kind of flipped. I actually don't need that many examples. I need dozens, maybe 100, but they need to be perfect. And they can't have errors. They need to be really good. And so it has kind of changed in that direction. So those are some ways you can get more accurate. So those are kind of three things I would advise on. Invest in evaluation sets and a framework to do that. Invest in the ability to handle errors, like by improving a prompt for that user, or adding edge cases or fine-tuning for that user. And then have a plan to say, my God, this is pretty good, but like it still kind of flakes out. If I could just make it a little bit better, and that's where you're going to lean into some of this prompt tuning and fine-tuning type stuff.
And the key, just to repeat the thing you just said a minute ago, is the moving from, in the early days of machine learning, it was, maybe 1 million pieces of data to have a broad enough view that you can extract a signal on whatever the subset of the information that's relevant to you. Then it moved to maybe, in the thousands, and you're saying now it's literally in the tens up to 100. And so
Exactly. You can start to see some pretty great results.
That's a complete game changer, and I think that means the entry ability is much quicker, much lower bar, right, in terms of being able to collect the data. But as you said, make sure it's great data is key. Well annotated, you have both positive and counter examples as well, right? So
that's right.
This is the right answer, and then these are the wrong answers.
That's right. And you're going to need to build infrastructure around all this. So the point is, it's not as free as I'm going to make an API call and we're done. There's going to be a lot of this kind of stuff. And then, you may have to resort to chunking methods like RAG, which has become a popular way to do it. So there's some more infrastructure you may have.
There we go. All right, good. Right when we get the best pearls of wisdom from Gaurav. So do you think that the same thing that played out for you as you went from your own underlying deep learning model to API based from GPT-3 and 4, do you think that investment you've made will continue to stand as the next generation comes, or will more of your fundamental infrastructure that you've built end up being consumed by or offered by the platform generically?
I think a bunch of that infrastructure will remain. I can't speak to, super intelligence. It's very hard to. It is
None of us can.
Singularity approaching in that, it's really hard to reason about what happens afterwards. But my best evidence that this infrastructure will continue is the rise of all of these infrastructure companies supporting Gen AI businesses and the growth of, existing ML infrastructure companies. because you still have all the same problems. You need to manage your evaluation sets. You need to have data provenance back to your end users. You need to be able to add positive and negative examples and ways to flush them and remove them. You need to be able to combine different kinds of data that you have in your backend with permissions into new eval and sets. Like, so, you need to then be like, hey, I was training this to recognize NDAs, but now that I've gone to Germany and I'm still working with English NDAs in Europe, but they're written differently and I'm failing. Oh, actually, I need to create a European data set to eval against. Then I need a few different European data sets to train against. Then I want to run a few experiments on which ones work the best, because there's a few different ways I could fine tune this. And then I need to decide and then version that thing and then ship it to production. So
That doesn't
this
change.
pipeline hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
In fact, people are just kind of relearning it. In some ways, it's kind of funny to watch. Um,
Great. So thank you for that. Let me go to a question we have from our
oh
group
no,
here. And he probably points out, and I'll just read this so everybody so they get it, that you guys had access to for when you started Lexicon, to the Allen Institute's incubator and the resources that are there. And actually, I know they're quite formidable. And so for those who don't have such fortunate access, what would be your advice of resources they should go after that could help them, jumpstart what they're doing more
yeah.
effectively?
So Pranav, this is a great question, and I think there's a few different things in here going on. So first, I'll address, back when we were doing this, there was no other game in town. You had to use deep learning and kind of build it up from scratch. So we didn't really have a choice. Um, Honestly, the resource I had access to that was amazing was my co-founder Imad. He was the one who came in and really had worked with ML for quite a while and was able to get us going. The AI Institute also was a value add, but not in the way you might think. They didn't really, it's not like they'll come in and give you engineers and researchers. They all have day jobs. They're all like working on their stuff. It was more that I could informally set up time with a researcher and be like, hey, can I grab 30 minutes or an hour? I want to walk you through what we're doing and get your feedback, which, as you all know, can be amazing. Like it's like, oh, I can think of 4 different ways to go at it. They'll be like, no, 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 that's noise. You need to do this, then this, and then you need to go talk to this person and read this paper, whatever. So that is kind of how that helped. And one thing I will say is I was lucky to find the right co-founder. That was actually the fundamental difference. So finding somebody on your team that has some skill set and experience in an area that you're going into deep is helpful. But beyond that, you'd be surprised how many people want to help startups, and even cold reaching out to them, working your investors, reaching out to someone you made a connection with like me and being like, Gaurav, I like that talk. Can you connect me to this researcher? People will take those calls and be able to help. The second,
But I just want the co-founder point, and this is a little bit of you live in a rarefied, privileged environment,
I
which
do.
is one of the few sort of centers of gravity of AI. And one of the challenges I know that's sort of kept many of our founders from moving as fast as they want to is the daunting view of, I don't have access to that kind of talent.
Yeah.
And so one of the points we've made is, well, there's actually people can learn this stuff faster than you'd think. So you've got a smart CTO, right? And they may not be able to do quite the cutting edge work, 2 years ahead of everybody else, but they might be able to do better than you think. What are your thoughts on the home
I am
growing stuff?
100% on board with that. So I think what has changed is, in order to be able to build some sort of ML platform, you needed a data science ML person on your team, because they would help you understand, like, oh, let's take the text, let's tokenize it in this way, let's do part of speech tagging, let's also da da da, like, and then we'll featureize these and feed them into a network, and then there was domain expertise. Now with LLMs, there isn't. You don't need to know those things. You need to really, even internally, I've been asked the question, like, if you're building a startup and it's going after Gen AI, what kind of talent do you need to hire on the engineering side? And my answer is really strong full stack developers. You don't need ML people. Like, what you do need is somebody who understands ML data hygiene and the process, but that is learnable. In fact, I just described what you need to know in the last 5 minutes. And
So,
building,
so thank you for saying that, because I've been saying that same thing to people. I think they don't really believe me. And so it's good to hear you say that
Not only
point.
that, but we internally, as we started to lean into more Gen AI stuff, we were like, hey, we need to rethink our composition of our team and hiring. And some of the data science people we have, we need to put them on more specific problems because like we don't need them to be working on some of the other stuff that they have been working on because now that's solvable with good full stack engineers just hacking away on this stuff.
Yeah,
Um, I did want
great.
to
So,
touch on one last part of Pranav's question, which is the
yeah,
wrapper question. Can they just get away without innovating on the tech itself? You can get away without innovating on the tech itself. Yes, you can. There are lots of successful companies out there right now that have raised gobs of VC money that are not really doing a whole lot with actually tweaking the LLM itself. Some of them are now fine-tuning it, maybe, but they're getting a ton of value on top of it with really building feature apps. And in a sense, it's democratized access. On one hand, it's completely democratized access to this technology. And on the other hand, what that means is it's back to the same old. You have a good product that customers want with a competitive price point. Great, because now everybody's using this feature. It's kind of like, I don't know, any new major wave of technology from the last 20 years. Like when Web 2.0 came around, it was like, is your website dynamic or does every page reload? This one doesn't. I'm going to start using this. Or like, do you have a mobile app? This one does. So I'm going to start, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I do think that you can get a lot of value without having to hack on the core tech. We have another
yeah,
question.
and I hope that everybody should take inspiration from those 2 points he said. Right, is that number one, you do not have to have an ML genius on staff, or even necessarily even a data science genius on staff. And number two, that you can generate real value, and value that makes your customers want to write you a check, and your venture investors want to invest in you, building on top of existing tech. I'm going to ask the question. It's the question that Praveen Shah asked. The answer is Dropbox Dash. It's actually available right now. It addresses everything you've got, which is piles and piles of data, and it'll access it from multiple sources, including Google Drive and Slack. And it's amazing what can be done now with off-the-shelf tech. Would you agree with that, Gaurav?
Yeah, yes. Praveen, there's multiple products. We'll just describe one. I was just running a search to try to find it, but like SharePoint had a 3-minute video on their one of their many websites like 6 months ago, basically showing like create a folder, drag documents, right click, start chatting. So it's there. And I will also say that building that today is a weekend intern project. I'm not joking. Like your full stack engineers, if you're a full stack engineer, you can build that in 2 or 3 days. And I'm not being hyperbolic. That kind of capability now exists, and we can talk about what you would do if anyone's interested. But we have more questions.
Yes, Akib.
Yeah, hi, Will. Thank you for inviting. Gaurav, what a pleasure. Many years and
Many years. Nice to
congratulations.
see you again, Sakib.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure. Congratulations on all your successes, Gaurav.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I want to change the gears a little bit and ask you a question that founders and myself and many of the founders I work with face. Have you had moments in your journey when you felt emotionally drained out, or you felt like this is not gonna go, or you felt like totally blocked, and you wanted to give up? What what kept you going? Where do you draw that source from? What is the thing that keeps you moving towards your goal?
For me, I knew what I wanted to build. We built it perfectly and there were no problems. So just kidding. That never happens. That never happens. Everybody should know those. Anytime you see a founder or hear a story or see some LinkedIn post, it's very much like what happens in social posts. People post the best parts of what's going on publicly, especially in a business, it's marketing. So you want to show that to your customers and investors. But internally, it is a wild emotional ride. There were many, many times, Saqib and team, that I felt, oh crap, what am I doing with my life? I have, a wife, and now I have 2 kids, and, I could be earning a great salary and not, having more time with my family, and instead I'm doing this, and it might all go to dust. And there have definitely been oh shoot moments in the building of the company where we're like, oh God, everything's gonna go to hell. Like, for example, when Silicon Valley Bank failed, or we came into raising our Series B in the worst fundraising Series B climate in a decade. Like literally, I'd wake up and there were TechCrunch articles like, worst time to raise a Series B. And I was like, okay, not time to work on my Series B deck. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff. And there's early days like, we're not getting product fit. You know, this customer told me they liked it, but they're not paying, or they got it, but there's no usage. And or I think I thought I had a product, we sold a few, but now we're not selling, and I hired the sales guy and he's not working out. All of these things happen to all founders. I had to learn a lot of resilience. I've definitely done hard things in my life, and those were coaching for these moments. So just know anytime in life you're going through adversity and you come out, you remember how you did that. And the next time you have adversity, you pull from that. I'm lucky that I have a great spouse and she acted as my therapist, which is a little unfair to her. So if you can afford it, find some professional help, like a coach who you can talk to about this stuff, because it is mental health, or a friend. The other things that helped me were, I have children, and children are very centering. They step you away from the tunnel that you're in and make you look at the world in a much bigger way, which makes you realize that you always have options. And this is one of the things you're doing, but it's not what you're doing, and you're going to be fine. If you're running a company, and you even if you don't have traction, you've done something that very few people can, and the market will pay you for that. So your hopes and dreams may not work out the way you planned, but life will be fine. And then the third thing is, I found that hobbies that forced me to concentrate were very meditative. And after doing that, it was almost like meditation. I find it difficult to meditate, but I found like learning to play the guitar or a musical instrument, I kind of got addicted to it, and I was like, why am I doing this so much? And I was like, oh, I know, because the whatever 15, 20 minutes that I'm trying to do it, I'm so focused on doing it that all of the stuff in the back of my head has to stop. And when I'm done, I'm like, why do I feel so calm? Oh, because my brain got a rest. So I encourage you to find someone to talk to, find something that expands your worldview. Children are a great one, but there may be others. Helping someone, service, family, those are all things that will expand your worldview. And the third is, find some meditative practice. Meditate, run, play an instrument, something that makes your brain go blank from all the stuff in the background.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And more than anything, know that it's normal. It's so normal. Yeah.
Expect the unexpected.
Founder mental health is not talked about enough in this world, and that's even in the thick of venture capital in the United States. You think about the rest of the world that's represented here on this call. It's definitely a real issue. So thank you for that, Gaurav, and thank you for that question, Saqib. There's a good question there from Dan, if you want to read that one.
Sure. As software platforms, frameworks, APIs rise up and disrupt in-process AI/ML innovation, and hardware is usually cheaper to rent than own, can you frame any Amazonian-esque tenets or starting places for startups to focus on AI/ML innovation investments, and where to avoid or tread carefully? That's a great question. Let's see. I'm going to try to distill these real time, but if I was to do it today, one, I would, let me think about this. So because a lot of the advanced AI capabilities are democratized, one important thing is ensuring that you're still sticking to the core fundamentals of providing great customer value. If you create a sticky product, no matter how you do it, whether you use Gen AI or not, you are, that's going to help your business grow. It's also going to provide you data that will later allow you to automate things using AI. So one, that part doesn't change. I would avoid investing too heavily in, if you're getting started from the beginning, I would look for frameworks that help you do things like build evaluation sets, run fine-tuning, be able to test those, repeat, that kind of stuff. If you spend a lot of time engineering that in-house, it takes away from building your product and you only have limited resources. And now we're at the stage where there are good open source projects and other things. There weren't even a year ago, but now there are increasingly more of those that you can pull from some of those and get it done. I would avoid getting enamored with the AI. Like the AI has to be, if you're just testing the quality of the AI in a workshop with your team, you're not learning enough. What you really need to do is plug it into the feature and iterate and learn about it with your customers. Because I have seen too many teams get fixated on, oh, if it only was this much better, everything would work. And I'm like, really? I mean, there's a few other problems with your app, and I don't, maybe you're just fixating on the wrong problem because it's easier to solve than talking to customers and finding the problem. Again, I just kind of keep coming back to AI is in service of a customer problem. So apply the appropriate investment to it. Buy versus build for infrastructure stuff and ensure that you're testing its value end to end with customers. I would advise build products where you capture as much of the user's workflow and activity as possible, because every such point is a point for you to later optimize and automate. I'll give you a simple example. With Lexion, we're a contract management system. In the process of contracting, you have to go and ask people for approvals like, hey, finance, this customer wants a 10% discount and pay quarterly. Can we do that? And hey, IT, they want some security stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to reach out to a bunch of teams. If you have built a system where people are having those discussions in your platform, you now have enough data to now say, what would be cool? What if the next time someone emails in saying, this customer wants this, I was able to look at the history of all the chats, feed that into an AI system, and now it could say, hey, the last time this happened, you needed an approval from finance. I've prepared the approval here with the right language. Just click to send it. That is where your system just starts to feel more and more delightful for these customers, and the ROI is there. It's like, wow, look, it's doing more work for me, and now you're actually building a real moat as well, because not only have you captured their usage, but now you have built bespoke experiences that improve that usage. And sure, you could argue anyone else could do that and compete with that. Well, first they have to have a platform where this activity happens, and then they have to sort of have like narrowed that problem and built an experience that combines AI and the end user experience to deliver something. And again, this might sound like a great idea, but if you find that users keep rejecting it, it doesn't work. So this is back to my point about make sure your AI and end feature are tested together to find out if there's real customer value. So I know I said a lot of words. I hope that was.
That's good. And let me drill that last point a little bit if I could, because the whole area of moat is one that we as venture capitalists think about a lot. You as a founder, you as now a leader in a substantial public company that wants to be defensible in what you build. How do you think about that moat building in a world where such a small number of training data examples can create a model that works? As you said, they have to be well done, they have to be accurate. But can you really build defensible moats? Is my question. Or can somebody else come and observe the same process and cross your moat quickly?
Yeah, I think to think of Gen AI as inherently moat creating is no longer true, or is a fallacy. It would be, I would almost say in 5 years from now, saying, I use Gen AI and I have a moat might today sound like, well, I use a relational database, so I have a moat. 30 years ago, that was a moat. Like people were writing things to flat files and worrying about concurrency and read-write speeds and distributed read-writes. Like it's not anymore. Now you're just like, oh, I need to scale like crazy. Fine, I'll just pay Cosmos DB until I hire enough engineers to do it myself, whatever. But the same thing is now true of Gen AI. So I wouldn't say I have AI, therefore I have a moat.
I meant my point is the data underneath, right?
Yes, I hear you. The data underneath is definitely a moat. The only people who will have similar data are your competitors. So that is the challenge, and those are the ones that you want to beat the most. So again, when you compare it to that, when I look at other contract management companies, I'm like, well, they have the approval discussion flow and they have all the red lines that happen in between. They could build these features, and they can and they will. So in a sense, it kind of comes full circle. Like once this technology becomes normalized and part of the stack, well, they have databases, they have access to React developers, they can make a full-fledged app. Now it turns into who can do the good old-fashioned business stuff best. Talk to customers, prioritize appropriately, build compelling features in good ways, deliver them at a good price point. So this is the great equalizer in some ways. That said, I think we are still in a period where there are a few things that you could do. If you find a novel application of Gen AI and spend considerable time in that space, there's a company that's coming out of the Allen Institute for AI that is working on in the chip design space. People write gigantic specs to send over to the testing team, and then the testing team has to do stuff with those specs before they can work on it. You can apply Gen AI to that problem to produce and consume and do whole portions of that. That's a very interesting example. I have a friend who's working in the bioscience space, and they're applying LLMs to various. So there's that kind of stuff. But when it comes to like, hey, I'm making a good old-fashioned SaaS app to, I don't know, help dentists automate their processes. There's a few very successful SaaS companies like that that are selling to dental offices. Then you're like, well, what's my moat? There's like 2 other competitors doing this. Your moat is going to be delighting customers with features that tied directly to ROI that would have been harder to build without Gen AI. That's really it. Don't build a feature because it's Gen AI for the sake of it. We're in a hype cycle. So in a sales process, it might help you right now to say, I have Gen AI. It will in the short term. It will also help you, your sales team or your marketing site, say, we invest in innovation and are a longer term platform than those guys. So there are those reasons to do it marketing wise. But in terms of like good old fashioned value, like everything else, will come off of this peak of the hype cycle. And then everyone will be counting where they're spending money and be like, that thing doesn't do anything for us. That thing doesn't do anything for us. And they'll whack it. So it'll come back to ROI, retention, value. And so in my dentist example, find something that's painful that they couldn't have automated before. It's like, oh yeah, how long do you guys take typing up what they told you on the phone into your HR, your health system? You know what? Why don't they call us through our Twilio integration? We'll do the transcript like we usually do, but we'll also summarize the bullets and pre-populate the field so they have something to start with. How much time do you think that'll save? And test it, they go build it. So
Gaurav, I loved what you said there, because in one hand, it was the Clay Christensen innovator solution, find a job that the customers want to hire you to go do. And while you're doing it, have your strategy for your platform plant some seeds that at some point might become a defensible moat, but you're doing it toward this good. So I really like that. Thank you very much.
I will add one last thing. Because this is so powerful, there are entirely new modes of building the same application. So, and people are beginning to try this. Some of it is failing, some of it is not, but there is a big opportunity here. And what I mean by that is, when you think of an application that maybe we've all used, like a CRM, like Salesforce, there's dozens of CRMs, and there are lots of actually fairly large companies that build products here. So it's a big space, and a lot of people have gone after every kind of niche. There's a CRM for plumbers, there's a CRM for whatever. And they all kind of follow the same model. You log in, you see your opportunities, you can drill down, you can keep notes and kind of move them along. But I don't know, what happens if there's an interface to the CRM that is through Slack or Teams, and it's like, hey, and it feels more natural, and you may still need some of those components, but maybe one of the big main interaction modes when people use your CRM is simply through chat. Like, hey, I just got off the call with so-and-so, we're going to meet again next week, enter. And it goes and populates it into the right place. But people can go see and they can correct it. But over time, they get more and more confidence, and they're just like, it does a pretty good job, good enough for me. And now suddenly, when someone comes to your marketing site, it starts with the CRM that works out of chat, amazing chat interface, still have the same backbone, so you can still do your old school reporting and do it manually if you want, if you don't trust us. But 80% of our customers use it this way. But so what I'm saying is there's still innovation, quite a bit of innovation with this tech. It has opened entire new avenues to thinking and doing things. And there's new capabilities. Like one thing we would talk about at Lexion, and we may still build even at DocuSign, is like an RFP filler outer. Such a pain in the butt to fill out a giant RFP for anyone who's done it. And if you've done it a few times, you're like, gosh, these questions are all the same. This is a great kind of place where you could go build an application. Anyways, we have a lot more.
How would you advise founders who they've got a product roadmap they're delivering to stay ahead of the competitors? They've got a list of key customer features they've got to get done. They're undoubtedly have a backlog. And how do they get their teams to think about what you just described, which was, I'll just simply say, Gen AI first product innovation, right? They turn it inside out, CRM driven from WhatsApp chat is is the example you gave. But how would you drive the mindset shift within a resource starved startup that's already got something in flight and needs to, but believes they need to innovate the way you said?
Well, first off, I'm a big proponent of listen to your customers and listen to your investors. So those are the two markets you're currently serving. You need to build, really, there's one. You need to build a great business. And if you do, investors will come. But there are things you can do that will appeal to investors because you're selling the future and you may not have that evidence. So first and foremost, don't sacrifice your roadmap in the allure that Gen AI will save you, unless maybe your customers are asking and you're like, man, we're losing deals because they're asking about Gen AI features and we don't
They're probably not asking yet in these markets. They probably don't know enough, right?
So then the way to think about it is, first, I would say, create awareness of the capability within your team. Yeah, and startup founders and small teams are naturally curious. So many of you are reading what's coming out, what's out there. Spend some time to play with it. You don't have to write code. You just need to go into GPT and take examples of what you're doing and see kind of what happens if I spend an afternoon trying to make this work in a more automated fashion. You all know in your products what needs to be automated or what's painful or what's not great. And try to think, hey, this is where people are getting stuck, or this is an area that customers tell me is important and they want to do XYZ. Could I make it? Is there an approach here where I could apply these new tools to provide a better solution than I could have using my old tools? That's really what the way you want the team to start to think. And then as you go through your backlog, you need to have a goal for any of these investments. So if you're in a stage where you're like, look, I actually believe that as a strategy, if we are, the first company serving Southeast Asia in this sector to announce some Gen AI features, that'll actually get us some marketing, some visibility, and may help with some customer sales. That's a good strategy. Then the next thing is, what is one or two features we can release that are going to be high use, that are high ROI that we can use? Like, that is a framework you can use because you'll get some press and some visibility. You'll be able to talk about differentiation, but you're also building an actual feature that'll create ROI. The second approach is to say, we don't have time for this. I'm not sure we're going to do this, but we do have this really gnarly problem we're trying to solve. And if we solved it, we know that we would close several more deals or bring customers to. Is this new tool set going to help us solve this problem? And I would come at it purely from, I want to solve this problem. Can you do it better for me than my other tooling? And if you find you can, then that's a great opportunity there as well. So I don't know if this framework is useful enough, but really, it again ties to ultimate customer value. But you need to create some awareness on your team so people know what the capabilities are, and then they can start applying this new tool set.
One thing that we've had some of our portfolio companies do effectively is to form what we call a red team, right? To go and say, to peel off 2 or 3 people to go and say, hey, you got a clean slate to build from. You've got resources and knowledge, and now go and be a competitor. And what would you do, right, to undercut us or to solve customer problems uniquely with no baggage? With a Gen AI first solution, and demo it in 4 weeks from now, right? And that often gets people thinking about it really fast, as you described.
Hackathons are a great way. No startup can afford to do a hackathon, so it really turns into like weekend tinkering, if you will. But look, we all join startups because we love to learn and be on the cutting edge, and so this is just continued investment in the learning curve, and it's very accessible for anyone who can do full stack development.
Fantastic. There's one last question here from
question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I had Gaurav, a quick follow-up question to what you were saying. When you're building your solution, your vision to what you think you need to do, how do you prioritize? There seem to be a number of things that seems like you need to do. How do you prioritize the features? How do you prioritize what to do first, what to do next?
The age-old question, priorities, and I think the question is asked from small startups to multinational public companies, the one I'm at. I think especially in startups, it's all about you need to know what your goal is in the next 12 to 18 months, because usually, or 24 months, that's usually your fundraising timeline. especially if you're on a venture-backed path. If you're not, and you are, just building a steady business, you still have growth goals that you're targeting. So first, starting with like, hey, my main goal is to prove product market fit, grow to a certain number of revenue, whatever it is, have that in mind. That will help sharpen your focus, because you can always be like, well, I want to prioritize this. Is it helping with that? No. Okay, well, why are we talking about it? The second is, even with that, you're going to have a long list of things. You're like, actually, we need to do all of these to win over customers and beat them. This is the fine art of, understanding what customers want, balancing them with your current resources. There's no great answer. You could go Google it. You'll find lots of frameworks on, are people ready to pay for it? Is it difficult to do? And they're like all these different kind of matrices. What we've done at Lexion that has served us well is we had a sales team. It was a sales-driven product. Very much, I would listen to sales calls, sit in on calls, talk to my sales team, treat them as the tip of the spear, and be like, what's going to help you close more deals? We would do the same thing looking at our existing customer base and spend a bunch of time with them and be like, hey, if we did these things, would you use the product more or pay us more? And so a lot of time with customers, because you will just start to see patterns, and nothing can really beat that. And you need to do it. You can't just get proxy answers and get someone to compile a summary. You need to watch the video or be on the call. You're just going to have to put in the legwork, but you're going to have to surf through, use your own product a lot, pretending to be your customer. Try to understand yourself where things get stuck, and then look at your usage stats and try to understand what's going on. Customers will tell you where the market should go. You just have to listen very carefully, and your prioritization will follow.